Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Tanu Masechtas Moed Katan daf Yud Tes. We're going to begin on the bottom of Yud Chesamid Beis, third line from the bottom. Ein koisvin shtari choy b'moed. A person is allowed to write a document which shows that there is an obligation upon that individual. That we do not do. However, even though we don't do this b'moed, v'im enu maminoi. Let's say there is, unfortunately, a lack of trust, the lender to the borrower, or for that matter, o she'enu ma yoichal, or let's say the scribe doesn't have parnasa and he needs to be able to eat. L'tzarech yomtiv, harze yichtayv. So we say that we'll allow this to be done. Ein koisen sfarim, tefillin, umezuzos b'moed. We don't write sfarim, we do not write mezuzos, we don't write tefillin on chol moed. Vein magihin os achas afilo b'sefer Ezra. We don't fix up anything, even from, as Rashi says, the Sefer Torah shel Ezra. V'ani shemati azara b'Hashem upi sefer muga hayi b'azara shemenu hayu mahigin kol sefer goyla. Okay. Anyway, the first pshat is a little difficult. What does it mean Sefer Ezra? Like, why that particular sefer? Ayin Rashi. You are allowed to write them for yourself. What does that mean? For your own use. Which is a question, basically, on this. Maybe you would think that there's actually a chiyuv to wear tefillin on Chol Moed, which we know that some people don't. Look at this Rashi. L'kayim zeh ha-mitzvah. Avot tzibor limchor de derech schirus havi choshem ulacha. So to make it the tefillin for someone else, that's considered like business, that's not allowed. But if it's for your own purposes, if you, let's say, you're noig to wear tefillin, you need a mezuzah, so you can do it on Chol Moed according to the Shita. Okay. Yud Testament Aleph. Different discussion about this Mishnah. V'toive al yerechai techelos l'tzitzasai. A person is allowed to weave literally upon their thigh the techeles for the need of their tzitzis. So what does that mean? So chutin avol loy biyadai. You're not allowed to do it in your hands. Bein etzba'osav, between your fingers. Upelach kader choil, and a pelach, which is a spindle, that is like the use of a weekday. Never you have to do some type of a shinui. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Kaisev adam tefillin mezuzas la'atzmo. As we said, you could write this for yourself. But toiva al yerecho, and you can put it the weaver and weave on your thigh to be able to make tchelos l'tzitzasai. However, lacherim, when it comes to other ones, betoiva, Divrei Reb Meir, says Rashi, v'loy b'schar. You can make it for other people without paying them. You're just doing them a good thing, but you're not allowed to make money off of it. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Marim, you can actually do an interesting trick. U'maycher eshelo, sell yours, and b'chayzer koiselatzmo, and then write it for yourself. So you can continue to do this. You make it for yourself and then sell it. Then you have to make another one for yourself, etc. Assuming, again, you're allowed to make it for yourself. And therefore, that's something which is allowed. Fine. Rav Yossi Omer, a person is allowed to do this, and Rashi says, for your parnasa, b'harvacha. Even though it's not necessarily, in this case, the davar ha'aved, you can do harvacha over here. It says Rashi, v'lo mari b'mi she'ein lo ma yoichel. Obviously, if you have no food and you need this to be able to survive, then just like the person who's the sofer could write the document ashtar choiv, soon that would be allowed. So this is coming to have obviously an additional chiddush that even though it's beyond what you actually need as far as survival for food, nonetheless it's still allowed. Okay, now the Gemara says the Oirile Rav. So Rav taught Rav Chananel v'yarmelo Rabba Barbachanel Rav Chananel halacha kaisav amaycher kadarku kadei parnasasai. Actually, with most makel, that you could write it and sell it in a normal way in order to be able to make some parnasa. But taiva al yerechot tchelas, and when you weave on your thigh the tchelas, tanabanan taiva adam al yerechot tchelas l'tzitzasai avaloy be'evan. Devar Rebbe Lezer. You're not allowed to use an evan, which is a stone which adds weight to it, which helps you in the process of weaving. That much we don't allow. So it's actually a machlokes whether you're allowed to use an evan or not. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Mishmoi be'even avoloi bepelach. He says, yes, the stone is allowed, but you're not allowed to actually use a spindle, as we saw, because that's derechol. Ram Orim bein be'even bein bepelach. So we see that the machlokas is even by pelach, whether that can be used. Or maybe Yehuda Mishmul v'chein Omer Rav Chiya bar Rabbi Yochanan halacha bein be'even bein bepelach. The halacha kaisev kedarko meicher kedei parnasasai, which we mentioned before. But again, we have this leniency also regarding this. Question TA 9. Be'ez oifen shari l'kuli am l'tabas chut l'tzitzatzei b'moed. So al yirechu shari l'kuli alma. If it's on your thigh, that's beferish in our Mishnah. That's totally allowed. It's not a question. What then it continues in question 9. Ve'elu fanim pligi uma halacha. So they argue be'even u'bepelach, and the halacha is, as we saw, that they are all allowed. Okay, let's see the next Mishnah. Hakoiver es mesai shloishi yomim koydem l'regel. And this is going to continue into the next daf, but according to this pshat in our Mishnah, you have to at least have done the process of Shiva for 3 days. So if you buried your dead 3 days before the regel, then batul him and gzer Shiva. So then Yom Tiv is mavatal. So as we mentioned before, as we're going to actually see on Daf Chaf, the Chachamim say afil Yom Echad, befil Shoachas, that even of a small moment after the Kvura, if you sit Shiva, that's enough. But according to this sheet, is what we're going to be sticking with for now, you at least have to sat Shiva for 3 days. Says Rashi, Hoyel ve'ikra veilus enu el shlosh yomim. Since the ikra veilus is for 3 days, which where we see that it's not so clear, but that is what it says. Now, before we continue, I want to just focus on this Taisus over here. So lengthy Taisus near Rasul Rabbi Yosi. It says ve'ein raya mikan shemutul haniach tefillin. It's not a raya from what we just saw before that you wear tefillin on Chol Moed. The Dilmer Amei Rabbi Yehuda Latamayu this theory they hold Shabbos Zman tefillin. Of Rav Yitzchak ben Avraham Hayamevi min Yerushalmi l'Hater l'Haniach, etc. Ein this Taisus. So there's a whole discussion again about the wearing of tefillin on Chol Moed based on what we saw. So again, if you were sitting Shiva for 3 days, and then a Yom Tov comes, and then all of a sudden it's over, which means, as Rashi says, even though you did 3 days, you don't have to wait until after the regel, then do another 4. No, it cancels it out. Shmoina, let's say it was 8 days before, so batam and gzer shloishim. So it also removes shloishim. Why? So says Rashi, batam and gzer shloishim. The hayel v'hiskel yom echad min hashloishim. So according to this, as long as you did 1 day of the shloshim, eno sarach lishmor klum le'achar regel din shloishim. El mutil alter b'tichiboises b'gihuts v'tispayres, all the different things which are a din of shloshim about getting haircuts or laundering. So if as long as a person sat shiva entirely all 7 days, and then the 8th day was the beginning of shloshim, so now even though it's now erev Yom Tov, so now Yom Tov removes the shloshim as well. Because we say as follows: Shabbos oila, Shabbos goes up, says Rashi. Ira Shabbos b'mei evloi oila l'minyan shiva. That Shabbos counts as one of the days of shiva. So Shabbos falls out in the days of Avelos, so that's one of the days. Ve'enu mafsekes, it doesn't interrupt it. Says Rashi, Dil achar Shabbos sarach lahashlim shiva yimei Avelos im haShabbos. You still have to complete it. In other words, the fact that you kept Shabbos, you don't say, oh, Shabbos came, so now Shiva's over. No, that's not the case. It's not mafsik. It doesn't interrupt it. In other words, you still have to continue to sit Shiva, as we know, afterwards. However, regolim, mafsikin. Regel actually will stop. It says Rashi, the chikaver meso shloshi yomim koydem regel, as we said, if let's say it was 3 days before Yom Tov, mafsik avelos legamri, the avelos stops. Once Yom Tov comes, Yacha regel ein mashlim klum, and then afterwards, then it doesn't. You don't have to complete it because Yom Tov cancels it. So again, if a person is sitting Shiva and then Shabbos comes, so that's one of the days, but they still have to continue sitting Shiva afterwards. But when it comes to the din of Yom Tov, that's not the case. When it comes to Yom Tov or the Regalim, it's mafsik. It stops it. So therefore, once, as we said in our Mishnah, 3 days have gone by. Now all of a sudden it's Yom Tov, so that's it. Shiva's over, or could be even Shloshim, even if it was for 1 day. Ve'enin oilin. Now what does that mean? Ve'enin oilin. So let's look at Rashi. What happens if during the actual regel the person buries their dead? In that situation, the gzer of Shiva doesn't get removed. So the days of the regel don't count as part of those days of Yemei Avelos. Actually, what you need to do is you actually have to wait until after Yom Tov, which is the reality of what we have to do. That even though Yom Tov will cancel it, that's only if the Kfur was before Yom Tov. If the Kfur took place on Chol HaMoed, so you actually have to wait until after the regel is over, and then after the regel, then you start sitting Shiva. Skipping a few lines in Rashi, Yani Oimer ki toy seiferhu. This is actually a mistake. Demash nizker shloish yomim ifnei regel lav davka. As Rashi says, it doesn't really mean 3 days. Yafil sha'achas, even 1 moment lifnei haregel batum and gzer shiva the haregel mafsik. So it's interesting. We're going to see this later on, but Rashi already alludes to this fact that as long as you sat Shiva for a moment before the Yom Tov, that's it. There's no more Shiva. There's no more Shloshim. If you already finished Shiva and you started Shloshim, that clearly is what the Mishnah we saw. But even that din also applies to Shiva. You don't have to wait 3 days. Okay. That's why Rashi says he feels it's a Tais Sefer. All right, weiter. Rabbi Lezer Oimer, Meshacharav Beis HaMikdash, from the time that the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, Atzeres Keshabbos. Shavuos has the same din like Shabbos. What does that mean? Now, Atzeres is a regel. So what happens if a person buries their dead before Shavuos? So Rashi says, what's interesting in the Beis HaMikdash or not? It's the same amount of days. So She'en Atzeres Tashumin Kol Zayin Ve'enu Elo Yom Echad. So when it comes to the time of the Beis HaMikdash, there's a din tashlumin, not just on Pesach and Sukkot, that if a person didn't bring their Shalmi Chagiga, that it says that you can be Chagig Kol Shiva. So that's even on Shavuos. Even though Shavuos is gone, the Yom Tov is over, you could still bring your Karban. But obviously, and therefore there was this more of a regal feeling on Shavuos. Man she'en kain b'zman hazeh, which is just 1 day, 2 days. So as the din of Shabbos, v'dinu k'Shabbos to oil of inu mafsekes. Therefore, it doesn't interrupt it. In other words, if a person buried their dead before Shavuos, the reality is that Shiva continues after that Chag. Specifically when it comes to Shavuos. Rabbi Gamliel Omer Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim Kirigolim. He says that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur actually has the same din of regel. Says Rashi, Hoyel Deinu El okay, it has the same din as the regolim that it cancels it. Chacham Omrim Lo K'Divrizeh V'K'Divrizeh El Atzeres Ka Regolim. He actually holds that Atzeres should be like any of the other 2 regolim of Pesach and Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur K'Shabbos. Why? Hoyel Ve'enu El Yom Echad. Because that's only 1 day. So the question is, well, didn't we just say that Shavuos is also 1 day? So anyway, that's what he says. Okay, question 13. Hakayver meso gimel yomim kaidim latzeres before Shavuos. Heim batel mimenu gzer shiva. So it's actually pretty clear to machlokas. Let's see what he writes. So bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim definitely batel because we say that it's like a regular regel of 7 days. However, once the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, we say to machlokas whether it would actually stop the Shiva, and therefore you don't have to make up any days afterwards, or it doesn't continue, or it's like Pesach and Sukkot, and it stops it entirely. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amarav, Gezeras, Amarav, Gezeras Batlu, Yomim Lo Batlu. What does that mean? So Gezeras, Rashi says, of Shloishim, the Gezerah of 30 is batlu. Avol yomim lo batlu. Shloishim yom lo batlu, which means the shloishim yom is not batal. Shedayin tluyin v'oynin, because it's still hanging. So this is referring to the situation of 8 days before the regel. So if it's 8 days before the regel, so certainly the notion of Shiva is gone. But now the question is, how about Shloshim? So Rashi says that the Shloshim is batal, but the days are not batal. They're still like hanging. So on some level, because it's now the 8th day, and you already did some of Shloshim, so therefore you don't have to make it up, so to speak. It stops it, but it's still hanging. There's still those 30 days that still exist. It is still 30 days. Rav No, even the days there's no shloshim at all. My time yomim lo batlo. So why would you say yomim lo batlo? Sheim lo gileach erev haregel, where a person would not have shaved on erev, let's call it erev Yom Tov, also legeach haregel. Then you're saying that they couldn't shave after the regel because there's an element of shloshim. Says Rashi, the chi batu gzer shloshim, that when we say we're mavatal the gzer of the 30 days, the boile ligluche erev haregel, that means you should then on erev regel you should have shaved v'lo gilech, but you didn't. So therefore asal gilech achar regel kol shloshim yoyim. So even though there's really no element of shloshim, but the fact is that you should, since it was canceled, again, it was 8 days before the regel, so Shiva's gone, now erev regel, we say, is shloshim. Shloshim gets canceled, so you should shave, do giluach mamish on erev Yom Tov. That's what you're supposed to do. The fact that you didn't do it is wrong, and therefore, even though technically Yom Tov cancels shloshim, it is the gezerah is batal, but the days are still there, which means that we're not going to allow you to get a haircut after the regel because you should have gotten it done before. Says the Gemara in New Testament Bays, Bosanya, and Rashi, important Rashi, Siato, this is actually a proof to what we just said. If you did it 3 days before, so batal Shiva. So Shiva is gone. You don't keep Shiva anymore. You don't have to make it up afterwards. Shmoni Yomim Kodim Regel, 8 days before, so obviously Shiva's gone. Now the 8th day is now the beginning of Shloshim, so Batul Menu Gezer Shloshim. Umagaleach Erev Haregel. It says Beferish, because Shloshim is canceled because it's Erev Yom Tov, so therefore you should shave on Erev Haregel. However, Imo Gileach Erev Haregel, Asagleach Achar Haregel. So that's exactly what we're saying, that even though it's true that the actual gezer of shloshim is batal, but the days still exist, and therefore, since you didn't shave as you should have an erev regel, so you're not allowed to do it afterwards. Abashol Eimer mutal gerechacha regel. No, we do allow it. Shekashem shemitzah shleisha mivateles gezer shiva kach mitzah shiva mivateles gezer shloshim. So basically, what it's saying is it's completely gone. So there's no reason for you not to be able to shave afterwards. So Shiva, Banan Shmoinatanan, we're talking about 8. So Ksavar Abashol mixes Yom Kakuloi. We know that Abashol, as we saw before, he holds that even a partial day is like a full day. And therefore the 7th day goes for this and for that. So actually, you don't need to rely on it has to have to be an 8th day. Even the 7th day, because the 7th day, even part of it, which is again what we're noyeg when it comes to Shiva, we hold the 7th day is Mixes Yom Kakulo, but not only is that day Mixes Yom Kakulo, we'll also say it on Shloshim, it will say on the 7th day is Mixes Yom Kakulo. And therefore, it'll count for both. And therefore, all you need to do is have 7 days before, not 8. Omer Rav Chisda, Omer Ravina, Bar Shila, Halacha Kavashol. The halacha, in fact, is like him. Umaydim Chachamim would disagree, Abashoil, as we saw this before, and this is actually going to be question 14. Be'eza Oifen Amrin L'Kuliyama Mixes Yom Kakulo, Yom Shvi, Kishachol Shmini Sholiyos B'Shabbos Erev Regel. Let's say Erev Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos. Erev, right, it's Shabbos, and it's Erev Yom Tov. And that is your 8th day. Now, according to the Chachamim, the 8th day is the only day you're allowed to do it. You can't do it on the 7th like Abba Shol, because he doesn't hold Mixes Yom Kakulo. in that regard. However, he will say in the event that it falls out on Shabbos, the 8th day, and obviously you can't shave on the 8th day, Shemutul Gileach Erev Shabbos. The Rabbanon are lenient and say, in that situation, we will say Mixas Yom Kikul and allow you to do Giluach on Erev Shabbos, even though that's only the 7th day. Because we'll say it's Oyel Lakan, because really in Brera, because he's not allowed to shave on Shabbos. So Kamanas Hadiyam Rav Amram Rav Avel Kivan Sha'amdu. Once he stands up, Menachmin Etzleinu. Etzle, we console from him. Mutter Brachitza, and he's allowed to bathe. Kaman Kabashol. So this is like the Shita of Abashol. Okay, look in Rashi. Kivan she'amdu menachmin and me'etzlo hainu b'yom zayin. On the 7th day, when we say our last time of hamakim yinachem eschem, kaman kabashon. Te'omer oyla lakan the choshev nami shmini the mavatam and exer shloishim. Omer Rabbi. Halacha kabashol. The halacha is like abashol b'yom shiva. In other words, even on this b'yom Shiva, on the 7th day, we'll say Mixas Yom Kikulo, and it's Oil Lakan. As we said, not only when the 8th day falls out on Shabbos, which is Erev Yom Tov Shechos B'Shabbos, that you can Galeach on the 7th day, he also agrees B'Yom Shloishim. In general, on the 30th day, Diamrin Mixas Yom Kikulo. That even though they may not say Mixas Yom Kikulo on Shiva, but they will say it when it comes to Shloishim. Rabbi Omer halacha kabashol b'yom shloishim, ve'en halacha kabashol b'yom shiva. He says the halacha is like abashol when it comes to the dinim of shloishim, which means we say Mixas Yom Kikulo, but not when it comes to shiva. When it comes to shiva, we don't. Amri halacha abashol bezu ubezu. Yermishmul halacha b'hamekel be'evel, which again is what we do hold like, and therefore we do say Mixas Yom Kikulo on both sides. Shloishim Yom Menolan. So the whole notion of Shloishim Yom, where does that exactly come from? Where do we see this? Actually, look at Rashi. Shas Brachitza ad ha'erev. Davadi Shalosh Shleimin Be'inan. We need 3 full days. Ad ha'erev Roichetz B'tzainin Oyamtin ad Chol Shemoyed V'yirchatz B'chamen. Okay. So Yolav Para Menazir. Ksiv Hacha. When it comes to a Nazir, the pasuk says Rashechem al Tifru. Ksiv Hasim Gadol Para Saroisha. Malahol Shleishim Avkan Shleishim. So just like we know Stam Nazirus, but Hasam Anal and Omer Rav Masna Stam Nazirus Shleishim Yoim. That when it comes to a Nazir, it's 30 days. So just like a Nazir is 30 days, so too there's this din of not getting a haircut for 30 days as an Avel. So my time of Omer Kur Kadishiyeh. Yeah, but Gematria Tlasan Havis. So he has a numerical value of 30. Amr Abhuna Beruda of Yeshua Hakol Moedim, everyone holds. Kishachol Shlishi Shaloi, when the 3rd day of Avelus falls out, Leos Erev Regel, that it falls out on Erev Pesach, Erev Yom Tov, Sha'asur Brachitza. That even Abashol, Rashi says, Diarm Mixas Yom Kikulo. But if the 3rd day of Avelus falls out on Erev Regel, you can't do Rechitza ad Erev until that evening. Okay, now let's see this Rashi. Why? Davadi shol shleiman be'inan. You need 3 full days. Ad Erev Roichetz B'tzainin. You can use cold water on Yom Tov, or Yamtin ad Chol Shemoyed V'yirchatz B'chamen, wait till Chol Moed, then you can bathe. But everyone holds you need 3 full days. This whole notion of Mixas Yom Kikulo, fine, Abashol is Mako by Shloishim, is Mako by Shiva, but the requirement of 3 days before the Regel, according to this Mishnah, it's absolute. It cannot be less than that. Amram Nechem Bebered Rav Yeshua, Ashchinhu Rapapu Rapapu Yasavi Karmi Halachik Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua. Igniam Amar Rav Nechem Bebered Rav Yosef, Ashchinhu Rapapu Rapapa Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua, the Yasavi Karmi Hakol Moedim. Everyone agrees. She'im Chal Shlishi Shlul Yosef Regel Shas Rachitza Ad Ha'erev. So we'll stop here. But again, we see that this is the din that we don't say Mixas Yom Kikulo in this regard. Okay, again, Ad Kan. Let's see a couple questions first. Question TA. Actually, let's see TB9, which I actually thought was a question from a while back. Ha'im regel oil minyan shiva. So does the regel, is it oil minyan shiva or minyan shloishim kishikaver beregel umadua? Okay, so this lamaskana, it says lamaskana. So if the person died and was buried on the regel, so the din is, let me just see how he writes it first, and I'll explain it. Minyan shiva enu oila doli nog mitzvah shiva beregel. So if a person is buried on, let's say, Chol Moed, you cannot you didn't start Shiva. Shiva never kicked in. You have to at least have sat Shiva for a little bit. If you didn't sit Shiva at all, so then you have to do the sitting of the Shiva after the regel. However, when it comes to Shloishim, that actually is Oila. Because since there is you can be Noig Shloishim on the regel, so therefore that's the din. And this is, let's just find this this Gemara. Let's look at this. It's actually found best in this Rashi on Amud Aleph. Just make sure I'm going to mark this correctly. TB9. So it says Rashi again. The chi cover meso b'soicha regel. The lo batim min exeres zayin. Ein yimei haregel oil leminyan zayin. Yimei avelus el achar haregel sarach leisha zayin yimei avelus. Zuhi svarati. That's what is necessary. So again, because you cannot, there's no din shiva, you didn't do shiva, you have to at least have some element of shiva. So if a person died and was buried during Chol HaMoed, so the law is that you are not able to, you have to wait until afterwards, and therefore that is the din. Okay. Mashen came by, it comes to the rega, when it comes to shloshim, it is naig. Okay, so that was TB9. TB9. Let's look at TA. I think there's actually a couple questions in here. TA 10. Cover hames betchilas haregel. So at the beginning of the regel, ha'im oil regel minyan shiva shloishim. This may be the same question. So ein oil minyan shiva but oil minyan shloishim. So again, this is talking about, as we just said, where a person at least did some of the shloshim because it's happening, so therefore it's still noig. However, the shiva is not noig because you can't do any avelus on the regel, and therefore it only starts after the regel. Ad kan.